Hello there, Jason here. Another week means another episode of Only Murders in the Building. Now, I know I had done a video like this on Monday for last week's episodes, but that was naturally because I had a busy week last week, and I didn't really have time to record anything until then. This week, I've made the decision to do these videos on Fridays. That way, it gives me more of an opportunity to rewatch the episode at least once and then gather my thoughts. Because on a show like this, you know, with it being a very interactive experience, I want to make sure that I've got all the evidence before I present my case, so to speak. Just like last week, naturally, a spoiler warning is in effect. So if you haven't watched this week's episode of Only Murders in the Building, I suggest you head to Hulu and check it out. If you have, let's get on with this week's episode. Now, I totally forgot last week that there were a couple of Easter eggs in the opening titles. That's the one thing I like about Only Murders in the Building, is every week they put a new Easter egg in the opening title sequence to kind of give you a clue, an idea of what's going to be going on in this episode. For example, in the very first episode of the series, a giant Easter egg actually appears in the archway at the end of the, in the last shot of the titles. And that's kind of a thing that says Easter eggs to come, So last week's Easter eggs in episode 1, if you'll notice, when they pull up Charles in his window, right behind him, you see the corner of the painting from episode 1. In episode 2, you see Bunny. Now you've seen Bunny walking her dog across the street, along the sidewalk. So in the end, they've replaced that dog with her parrot, Mrs. Gambolini. Now, this is actually one that went from an Easter egg to a permanent addition, because Mrs. Gambolini also appears in the title sequence this week. So that kind of threw me off a bit when I was looking for it. But in this episode, the Easter egg is a champagne bottle sitting between Charles and Oliver on the ground when they show the final shot of the three of them with their backs facing the camera. And it's right there on the ground. And that kind of signifies the celebration on the roof of the Arconia. And the significance of that champagne bottle was explored throughout the episode. This episode, The Last Day of Bunny Folger, was an interesting one. Now, as I had mentioned in my last video, episode 2 had ended with the parrot delivering the line, "I know who did it." Obviously, that was a big stretch for an episode 2 of a series and, episode 3 to explore, because in the opening moments of this episode, we see that parrot doesn't know what happened. But it does result in a hilarious scene of Charles and Oliver trying to interrogate a bird, which I thought was, it was on par for the show. And Steve Martin and Martin Short are always hilarious. But I wouldn't count that parrot out yet. Having had a parrot myself a long time ago, I know that certain sounds or phrases can be triggered by just rejigging the memory a little bit. So it's quite possible that the bird heard some stuff when Bunny was being murdered, and that might lead to another clue. So yes, while it was kind of used as a red herring in this instance, I wouldn't count that bird out just yet. Just give it time. So moving from that, we go back to the bag of papers that Oliver and Mabel quickly scrambled and grabbed anything they could find on Bunny's desk, mostly because Oliver was afraid that the cops would come looking in her apartment and find notes written by him, because of course he signed them, threatening Bunny's life, because he was angry at her. He didn't really mean it at the time. He was just mad, and he wanted to he wanted to get her to reconsider or just let her know how angry he was. This episode definitely puts to bed the fact that Bunny was murdered, could have been murdered by any of the three of them. Well, especially Mabel. The last day of Bunny Folds. So to get there, going back to I know I'm all over the place. To get there, we go to that bag and they find some receipts. Receipts from the day that Bunny died. So using those receipts and any paper they can find that kind of might have led down the path of Bunny's last day, they try to recreate her last day, and thus it's a new element comes along in that we actually get to see Bunny's last day on Earth from her perspective, which I thought was a very interesting move. And I don't really think any murder mystery show or movie has ever done anything like that before. Telling the final moments of the murder victim from the perspective of the victim. I thought that was pretty cool. It kind of reminded me of, as an aesthetic episode, much like last season's The Boy in 6B, which is still my favorite episode of the series. And quite frankly, this episode is really tied for that position, just based on its creativity on alone, and also the fact that it puts you in the mindset of the victim in a way that they really didn't explore last season with Tim Kono. I thought that was really cool. I mean, because last season we were trying to figure out who Tim was, and yes, Mabel knew who Tim was, but there were still things about him that she didn't even know. This season, we know who Bunny is. We've seen her around the building. We've had interactions with her in the past. So it was really kind of, how do you get to know somebody that you pretty much already know? By getting in their head and trying to piece together where they were and what they did. And I thought that was really cool and really interesting. So her day starts, her day is her last day in another sense. It is her last day as board president of the Arconia. She's stepping down and retiring. And along her day, she's moving through the city along her day, and she encounters people. So, congratulations. I hope you enjoy your time. Your free time, that sort of thing. And throughout the day, she has encounters with Oliver, Charles, and Mabel, who are celebrating the 1-week anniversary of their cracking of the Tim Kono case and saving the building from Jan. So the first big encounter she has with the trio is in the courtyard, where they're having kind of a little get-together with a few people from the building and the superfans. And she chastises them for having a public gathering without a permit, and for the superfans trying to sell merchandise without a permit, and just general Bunny stuff. Then she has a little conversation with the new board president that we met in episode 2, Nina Lynn. She's getting close. She's getting close. I would say at this point she's like 8.5, 9 months pregnant. But she's really gung-ho. She's ready to be the new board president. So Bunny and Nina are having a conversation in the courtyard and kind of going over some last-minute things. We also find out through a conversation with Ursula, then just her looking at general brochures and even talking to Mrs. Gambolini and things, that she's planning on moving to Boca Raton to spend her retirement somewhere where there is no winter in winter. Then she goes to this restaurant that clearly she goes to every day. There is a mysterious friend who will not be joining, who was with her yesterday, who will not be joining her today, and she makes a point to tell the waiter that he is not a friend. So she goes through a meal. Oliver comes in with his son Will to get some, get some food for the celebration with Charles and Mabel. They have kind of a little encounter. Bunny mentions something about a window that Will broke when he was 8 that Oliver still hasn't paid for. It's just in typical Oliver fashion. And then they kind of part ways. Then at the end of her meal, she goes to pay and she gives the waiter an envelope filled with cash. And she says, I went over 20%. So he's like, oh, this is too much. And she said, no, what am I going to do with it? Who am I going to give it to? And she tells him, you know, get that DJ equipment that you've been wanting to get. And she says, but just do me one thing, do me one favor. Don't love one thing. Because if you love that one thing, then when it's gone, you have nothing. And that really speaks to her character. So there's clearly something that she loved that's gone, and she has nothing. Then she heads back to the building. She has an encounter with Charles and Mabel in the elevator. The elevator kind of shuts down. There's a short. And she opens the elevator, you know, she opens the emergency box, does some finessing. Mabel says to her, Bunny, you're a badass. And she says, well, and I thought I was a cranky old bitch. And she, you know, Mabel remarks that she knew she might have, was going to regret that. Then she heads to her apartment for what she thinks is getting ready for the board meeting, but it turns out it's a surprise retirement party featuring the board, which consists of Howard, Dr. Grover, the therapist, someone else that we may not have met completely yet, and Nina Lynn. And Howard has moved Mrs. Gambolini. It's clear that Howard is just looking for Bunny's affection and attention. So I'm not counting him out just yet. Then Bunny jumps right into business, mentioning something about Amy Schumer. What are our thoughts on that? Nina Lynn's like, hey, you know, this is your last day. It's your party. You know, we'll worry about that at the next meeting. And she's like, no, we got to take care of this now. And she says, well, you should enjoy this. And she says, I'm not retiring. She kind of changes her mind. And it's something, I believe it really has more to do with something that Charles had said to her when she had fixed the elevator, because he's starting to panic, of course, like he always does, when the elevator's not working. And she gets it working again, and he turns to her and he says, well, I don't know what we'd do without you. And she's also seeming like she's having second thoughts throughout the day. And at that point, she says, I'm not doing it. I'm not stepping down. We rushed this. You know, you're not ready. There's more I can teach you, to Nina Lynn. And Nina's like, well, you know, you said you wanted to do this. And she had Howard go back through the minutes of that meeting back in November. And she says, you don't have to repeat my words back. You know, Howard starts reading and Bunny says, you don't have to repeat my words back to me. And Nina says, Howard, like in a way that's like, I'm in charge now. And it becomes clear that Nina's making this push to change things in the Arconia. Bunny is someone who has lived in the building all her life. As Nina points out, the only reason she's board president is because her mother was board president and she inherited the position from her mother. But Bunny believes that the integrity of the Arconia should be preserved, while Nina wants to push it forward into the 21st century. And she wants to do that by monetizing it, mostly. So Bunny makes the thing, says, you know, I won't let you get away with this. And it's clear that Nina's very upset. And, you know, she calls her an ungrateful, power-hungry, Bunny calls Nina an ungrateful, power-hungry bitch. Which, wow. And it's a very heated exchange that the trio then pin her as a primary suspect, having gathered all the paper from Bunny's apartment. They also found a copy of the minutes from that meeting. After that, she's kind of home cleaning up from the retirement party / board meeting, and she overhears the noise of Charles, Mabel, and Oliver's party in Mabel's apartment across the hall through the vent in the bathroom. I think I just said, well, through the vent in the bathroom. So she goes over there, and the three of them are like, oh no, I'm sorry. You know, we're sorry. Are we too loud? And she's like, no. Because there was an exchange on the elevator before between Mabel and Charles. They were going to go up to his, she had some champagne. They were going to go up to his apartment to get those champagne glasses. And he had mentioned, you know, it's not really champagne if you don't get it from the region of Champagne. Where's that from? And she says, well, it's like from the market down the street. And I was like, well, that's a good vineyard, trying to be funny. But Bunny clearly, you know, overheard that conversation. So she comes to the door with a bottle of champagne from, well, what she would say, you know, something more top shelf than the grocery store stuff that Mabel had earlier. So she gives the three of them the bottle, and presumably she's kind of feeling the loneliness that she's been kind of fostering over all these years. As Uma had mentioned in episode 2 at the memorial, that Bunny had no one. She had no family. She had no friends. All she had was Uma and the bird. And she's really kind of feeling that. So she gets these nice words from Mabel and Oliver and Charles on the elevator. And it's kind of, you know, she hears them having fun and she thinks, you know, maybe she wants to join. So she brings the champagne. Well, thank you so much, Bunny. And she actually thanks them for saving the building, for solving the Tim Kono case, getting Jan, you know, her just desserts, and saving the Arconia. And then they decide, as their token of appreciation, Oliver quickly grabs a Only Murders in the Building hoodie that he had from his box from that building meeting and gives it to her. And she says, oh, you think I want this from you guys? And they're like, come on, try it on. She's like, oh, okay. So she quickly, you know, she puts it on, and, you know, they're like, oh, you look good. You know, she's like, you know, I was in Woodstock, that sort of thing. And they kind of have a nice little fun moment. And then they're like, well, thanks, Bunny, bye. And they close the door on her. And Charles has the realization, you think she wanted to come in and join us? And they're like, oh, what? You know, Oliver's like, oh, no, I don't think so. And we wouldn't want that, would we? And they start to hear her cry on the other side of the door. Mabel notices that Bunny still looks out the door, you know, sees that Bunny's on the other side of the door. And then they start to hear her cry on the other side of the door. So they're like, oh, man, you know, we got to do something now. We got to invite her in. No, it would be a pity invite. And it's like, we have to. So they open the door to try to invite her in, and she's not there. And they look and they see across the hall, they hear her door slam, as in she went into the apartment. So they decide, well, you know, that was kind of, well, I guess crisis averted, I guess. So what do we do? Well, you know, let's keep this party going. But, you know, in case she wants to come back, let's just go upstairs. Let's take this more private. Let's go to the roof. So that's why they wind up on the roof. So Bunny is alone in her apartment, still wearing the hoodie, watching TV with Mrs. Gambolini, watching a crime show, and the person on the TV says, I know who did it. She repeats it back to Mrs. Gambolini. Mrs. Gambolini repeats it back to her. Thus, the origin of the I know who did it line. And there's a knock at Bunny's door. Bunny shouts, you know, it's too late. I don't want to hang out anymore. And then they knock again. She goes back to the door and says, what do you want? And then she has a struggle. And then cut to Mabel coming back down to her apartment to get that other bottle of champagne. And we kind of pick up on the scene, you know, the muddied scene of Bunny stumbling through Mabel's apartment, blood all over herself with the knitting needles in her chest. So we have a prime suspect now. We have Nina Lynn. I'm still suspicious. I'm even more so suspicious. Here's the thing. I know Alice was not in this week's episode, nor was she mentioned, but there were a couple of things in this episode that kind of have pointed me towards Alice even more. While running through her day, Bunny gets a phone call, picks up the phone, and it's someone who wants her painting. She says, "You again? I told you, I'm not selling that painting. Goodbye." So she hangs up on him. And she says, "I'm thinking it's somebody who might have wanted to buy that painting. That could be your prime suspect there." And I'm still not sure about Alice. I mean, she's the only one who's kind of playing taboo with Mabel's whole, murderer thing, and she comes in so quickly. I'm very suspicious of Alice. And while Nina Lynn might be our prime suspect, she's like 8.5, 9 months pregnant. I don't see her being able to strong arm somebody. Now, I do see the potential in maybe a Howard thing. Last season, the superfans said, it's more than one person, right? Well, they didn't really go that angle in season 1. But are they exploring that angle in season 2? Because remember, again, Howard has a black eye and is very interested in the podcast, something he was not interested in last season. So I don't know. We'll see. So as it stands, we do have a prime suspect, though. The trio has a prime suspect, Nina, the new board president. So I'm sure they'll be looking into her in next week's episode. I absolutely love this show. You can tell because this video went far too long. But I'm really excited. I cannot wait to see next week's episode and what they have in store next week. So tune in. We're going to talk more Only Murders in the Building next week on Friday. So let me know what you thought down in the comments. Are there any clues I might have missed? Is there any theories you might have? What's going on? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that notification bell. I'll be back. As I said, I'll be back next week with another episode where I talk more about Only Murders in the Building. Again, I absolutely love the show. I adore it. It's one of my favorite shows, and I'm definitely going to keep watching. So until next time, see you later.